This is Starcade, TV's first video arcade game show, starring your favorite video games, and some brand new ones being introduced to the public for the first time anywhere. And now, here's your host for Starcade, Geoff Edwards.
Thank you very much. Hi, welcome to Starcade. Here we are backstage where our players are warming up for today's big match, because today, one of them is going to have an opportunity to win their very own video arcade game. So players, you guys ready? All right, let's go play Starcade. Here we go. All right, here we are. This is where it's all going to happen. These are the guys who are going to make it happen. So let's meet him right now. Your name is?
Okay, my name is Scott Schreiber. I'm one of the three hosts.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Jeff. Watched your show growing up. Watched several of your shows, apparently. I'm more of the technical guy. I do like all the engineering questions and the, tech segments and all that. And our third guy in here is our Englishman, which is pretty easy to distinguish, and it's UK Mike.
Okay, cool.
And I'm SoCal Mike, Jeff. We spoke a little
earlier.
So.
The UK Mike would be Mike James, right?
Yes.
That's the one. You can tell who I am because I sound like this.
Oh, really? Well, I'm so glad.
Jolly good show.
Hey, Mike, do your US Mike for him.
Oh, I've got to warm up for that. Scott thinks I've got a great American accent, which I don't.
That's brilliant.
I don't think it has too much of an accent because I kind of always sound the same like this, sort of.
I don't know.
It's like from Louisiana or Mississippi.
Yeah.
Well, you know Michael Jackson, the talk radio host, right?
Oh, yeah.
I used to be his program director at radio. And he was always like this, He's got some, hello, how are you? But if you call him at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's hello.
Now, Jeff, your name looks English to me. The way you spell it is because.
Yeah, it's Welsh.
Okay.
My father's parents were from Wales, and when I was in high school, we were studying Geoffrey Chaucer, which is Geoffrey. So the teacher would say, "All right, let's turn to page 4 of Geoffrey Chaucer," and she'd look at me and say, "Geoff."
Yeah.
It's funny. She couldn't get it.
Yeah, that's funny. That's hilarious. Well, cool. Well, we want to thank you so much for coming on with us. I let the guys know that I guess you've not been interviewed with regards to your work at Starcade before.
No.
Which kind of surprises us, I guess.
Well, I appreciate you thanking me, and hope to talk to you again sometime. Bye.
That was the quickest interview we've ever done.
Yeah, he's trying to do a normal podcast interview. Jeff, I'll tell you something about our show. The way that we do our show is we're very freeform on the show. There's no content or language restrictions. You can say whatever you want. We're not politically correct. Whatever you want to say and however you want to express any experience you've had, we're completely free with however people want to say it. As the interviews go, we're kind of like free form. It's like if it takes 10 minutes, it takes 10 minutes. If it takes 2 hours, we've done like, in fact, the godfather of video games, who sort of invented the very first video game for arcade use, we interviewed him, and it was like 2.5 hours. Wow. So whatever the natural course of the conversation is, so you're under no pressure. Whatever you want to tell us or explain something, just take your time and say whatever you feel.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Hey, everybody, this is SoCal Mike, and we've got what we think is a very special interview with a gentleman by the name of Geoff Edwards. Now, a lot of you guys will know immediately who we're talking to because he was host of a very popular, well, at least with arcade gamers and through today, arcade collectors of today, an arcade game show called Starcade. Which aired, of course, back in the early to mid 80s. And according to Geoff, he's not been interviewed with regard to his work at Starcade. So this is kind of another first for us and for our listeners. And we just want to thank you, Geoff, for coming on and spending some time with us and telling about your history with Starcade and maybe some other things that you've done throughout a pretty long career in the entertainment industry.
I'm happy to be here. Now, you understand that I did Starcade, and so that's still in my mind. So, I hope you don't mind.
I know. When guys, when we had asked Geoff to come on and do an interview with us, one of the replies that he had sent back was that we may have to refresh his memory a little bit about that time period. Like with us, we've all been watching this show, when it originally aired, and of course they've now been. We're fortunate enough to be blessed with a website that they've still got operating, dedicated to the show. So a lot of arcade game collectors and video game collectors, continue to watch these, over and over and over again, because it's just such a great documented history of the arcade game. You guys had some really rare games on there. The games were in pristine, wonderful condition all the time. And so these are still shows that we continually go back to look at gameplay footage and stuff like that. So it's very much, even though it's in the past for a lot of us, it's still kind of a present day interaction, with this show, which I think is a little strange for game shows, because, a lot of game shows, I don't know if they documented, I suppose some of the questions that were asked, and of course you can see the clothes that people are wearing and all of these types of things. But this show, I think
they have their own network now. The Game Show Network goes back and plays old game shows from, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, but it's like this, Starcade was so unique, I think, because it really documented a time in technology and in gaming, of course, which is a huge industry today.
Yeah, well, that's true. And don't forget that they were able to take the game and put it actually on the screen.
Yeah.
Which is, that was a little bit of wiring technique that was incredible at the time.
How did they do that? Did they have a camera? They had to, because I know it was a cut screen that showed the gameplay and the timer, and I was always kind of curious how that was all configured. How did they do that?
Well, I do not know. I was just looking from the other end.
Yeah.
But I know that in order to get the rights to all those games and to have all we had a room that was full of games.
I know.
There must have been 50 of them in there. And when I went up to shoot Starcade, every once in a while I'd take my two stepsons up, who were about 10 and 12 at the time, and they spent hours.
You must have been their favorite family members, man. That would have been like heaven.
Well, I'll tell you,
wow,
kind of a secret thing. I met my wife, and I won't go into details of how that happened, but I went over to her home for dinner and to meet her two sons. And I was a little nervous about that, but I took over 3 video games.
Oh.
And we had, and the whole night the 3 of us just played video games while she sat there, and from that time on we got along fine.
Wow. I can imagine.
It's funny, just to back up a little bit to the technical achievement of displaying that. There are a couple ways that could have been done. The big problem with pointing a camera at a screen, and I'm sure you've seen this in a million different shows, is the refresh rate. You'll get these bars that creep up and down the screen.
Yeah, right.
So that's because, the camera's running at one refresh rate, the screen's at another, and CGA monitors, which is used in all these arcade games, is simply not the same rate as TV cameras. So you can't just point the camera at the screen and get a still shot without it scrolling. So what they would have had to have done is pulled the raw video, gone through a scan converter, and reconverted the video to another frequency, the NTSC frequency, in order to get that done. So when he's saying there was a wiring job, yeah, they probably had to do quite a bit of custom setup, and then of course reconfigure for each individual game that they got in there
for every show
to tap into the game and all that. So that was quite the it wasn't an insurmountable achievement, but it was they did it the right way, because the video is crystal clear and solid, and not done the lazy way with scan lines rolling through it.
That's why I love these interviews, because it never occurred to me that there were no refresh lines, but there weren't.
Well,
Wow,
I'm sure that they were the first to ever do that. That was an achievement for them, for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. So going back, Geoff, kind of to your history. You've been a game show host, a radio host, and an actor. So
yeah.
And you were born in Jersey.
Right.
And I guess went to school out there, but then quickly moved out to San Diego.
Well, the secret behind that is I was a jazz drummer. I wanted to be a drummer and a musician. My parents convinced me to go to college before that happened. I spent 4 years at Duke University and only had one weekend where I wasn't playing with a band. I played with a big band, small groups, etc. So I went into the service, got out of the service, came back to New York.
Sir?
Oh, I was in the Air Force.
Oh, good.
I was stationed on Kumijima, which is an island 50 miles off of Okinawa. And I got to tell you, our fun was watching the mail plane come over and drop the mail and try to knock the laundry off the lines into the mud.
Yeah, pilots are scumbags. We do things like that.
So anyway, I went down to the Union, and there was a tenor man there, a guy who had played with Woody Herman, and he was really Phil Urso. He was a terrific tenor player. He's standing there in a light drizzle with his collar up, and he says, "You know where I can get a gig, man?" And I said, this might not be for me, because I'm not as good as a lot of people here in New York. So anyway, I went to a radio school, became a disc jockey, and got a job up in Albany, New York, WOKO, first in Albany. And
Didn't a lot of people get their start in Albany, it seems like?
that could be. There was a big city up there, but they weren't too bright. Anyway, I had to do the morning show, which is fine, except that was at our studios were at the transmitter, and in the wintertime, I had to turn the heat on in the transmitter, and I did the whole morning show. The first hour I always did with gloves and overcoat. So about a year into that, I wrote every radio and television station around the coast of Florida, from the top of the east
someplace warm
and to the west. Yes. And I got a job down in West Palm Beach with a great bunch of people. Did that show, and after that, the boss wanted me to sign a 7-year contract and not very much money, and I didn't want to hang out there. So I got a job in San Diego. I drove out there, went on the air, and from that point on, I started to, move my career forward. But the big thing about the San Diego show was that sometime later, I met a guy, the program director when I got there, at a party, and he said, Did you ever know what happened when you came in that first day? I said, no, what? He said, well, the manager, Jack Kiner, was ill. He had the radio on, and you went on the air, and he called me up, and he said, who the hell is that? And Don, the program director, that's Geoff Edwards, that's our new guy. And the manager said, could we get rid of him? And what happened was the station I worked at in West Palm Beach was not supremely technical, and the tape I made ran at a different speed to their tape players. Oh. So it turned out hi, this is Geoff Edwards, and I'd like to be on your staff. And of course, I got there and said, hi, how you doing?
So after San Diego, then you started moving north?
Yeah, I went up to KFI.
Yeah.
Actually, in San Diego, by the time I was ready to leave there, I was program director, news director, and I flew the traffic airplane. So I was kind of busy.
You really
flew
the
traffic airplane?
Yeah, I have 600 hours in big left-hand turns.
So do I. Yeah. That's about a point. I know that well. So does Scott.
So what kind of airplane were you using for the traffic plane?
Cessna 172.
Oh, so you just had the yoke over, pair of binoculars out the window?
No, I didn't need to do that because you could see all the cars. And I remember one time I was directing somebody around a traffic jam, and I saw a red car, and I started to talk to the red car, and I took them to 2 parking lots and to another street, and then on past the jam.
Who needs a GPS when you've got Geoff Edwards in an airplane flying above you?
Geoff positioning system.
Yeah.
GPS.
In 200
You still
yards,
fly
turn
today?
left.
Oh man.
Do you still fly today?
No, I stopped flying a while back, and I love flying, absolutely. But there's really no place to go, and so I don't fly anymore, really.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with it. I've done it all my life, and always enjoy it. But I've never done it really commercially. I've never done it for money. So that's they got all the pipeline patrol, all that kind of stuff, and it's a great way to build commercial hours. I've just never really gotten into that aspect of it.
Yeah, well, I never did it for money either. Remember, that was San Diego.
You were a high-priced charity.
Yeah, right. But I used to love it. I used to fly out after I moved up here to L.A. I used to fly out to Catalina for their buffalo burgers.
Oh, what do they call Catalina's airport? The something in the sky, don't they call it like?
I don't know. It's a death trap.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people have plowed it in up there.
Well, when you come in, you're aiming right at a cliff.
Yeah.
And you have to pay attention to what's going on with the air around you. Then when you land on the runway curves. It's like a slight hill and then down. And people think the runway has ended, but it hasn't. So one of the things that when they take off, sometimes they try to get up in the air too early. And when they land, they try to stop or they try to gut it again. They don't think they're going to make it. So you got to go out there with somebody who knows it before you ever fly out there by yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we've got a few like that. We have one called Mountain Empire, and it's on the side of a hill, so it has a bank and a slope, and you can't see the other end.
Whoa.
So that's a disconcerting airfield, to say the least.
It sounds
it
sounds like we're talking about a golf hole.
Hey, you know what? But believe it or not, once you get into flying into enough airports, you really do start to discuss different airfields, like the lay of a golf course.
Yeah.
18th hole at Richmond, that's a tough one.
Only thing is, when you land in a plane, they're all par ones, aren't they?
I had a time when I was on my one of my solo flights. We have to land at 3 different airports, and I was going into Oceanside. I hadn't been in there, and I didn't know much about it. But I'm flying, and I'm seeing it down there, and I said, "Whoa, there it is! Wow, that's huge! Oh, this is going to be great!" And I'm on downwind before I turn base, and I suddenly realize it's the Marine Air Base.
Oh, nice.
Camp Pendleton.
Oh, goodness.
At any moment, jets are going to shoot me out of the air.
Wow.
Well, I tell you what, today they're a little less friendly than they were back then.
Boy, that's true.
So you had quite the involvement with radio. I mean, you got to do traffic, patrol. You got to do the news. Did you ever do any of the sports broadcasting or weather? I mean, you seem to move between a lot of mediums.
I did sports when I was at KMPC in Los Angeles. I was the play-by-play guy for the tennis team, the LA Strings. So I did that for a couple of years. But I didn't leave the radio station.
Well, now, the reason I ask is because I know nothing about sports, like nothing. I could not do play-by-play. But there are broadcasters that seem to go from one subject to another. One day they could be a weatherman, the next day they could be a sports broadcaster, because they're broadcasters. Kind of like some businessmen. One year they're working for a fast food restaurant. The next day they're working for an electronics chain, and to them it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I noticed that you did very, very well when it came to calling play-by-plays on video games that you had on the show. So, a kid would be playing a game, and you would, call out what they were doing and why it was important. Was that sort of just an extension of, sports or weather to you, or is that its whole own unique entity?
Well, for me, I didn't know anything about those games at all. And what I would do is I studied magazines, video game magazines. Mm-hmm. And I would read them, and they would give you and if you do this, you can shortcut here and go over there. They'd give you tricks for the different games. And that's what I would pass on to the players.
Did the other hosts do that, or were you the one that brought that in? Because I know before, a contestant played any game, you would give them, a couple of little hints, and I was curious if those were on a monitor or if you did that from memory, because it didn't look like you were reading from a monitor.
No, I had no cue cards or monitor. I didn't do that. No.
So you would have had to have known about, 5 games per show, or maybe with the extra game, maybe 6 games. Well, I guess we're 5 games a show. But you would have to know a little bit about every game for every show. And how many shows did you guys tape? That's a lot of information you had to know.
I don't remember how many we did a day. I think probably 4 or 5, maybe 5.
Wow. Yeah. So, because you gave really good hints. And I think people today will watch those to get your hints.
Yeah, I got them from the magazine. So, but this has always been something, and I've tried to pass it on to anybody who's coming up. Prepare, always prepare. Don't go and when it sounds like a guy's just ad-libbing and he's being funny, he's doing this and that. He's probably prepared. I don't mean he's written the lines, but he's thought of things and he's ready to do different stuff. So I think that's what you have to do to really be a success.
I noticed when you were introducing the contestants, almost in every show, you'd always have a one-liner, that would just come off the top of your head that were just brilliant, always.
Yeah,
you were really good at just thinking at the top of your head, just ad-libbing, and throwing some humor into the contestant introductions. I thought it was something I noticed, like on almost every introduction, there was some humor you would interject into that.
Well, my mind works that way, and I'm happy that it does. A lot of times, what I learned was to stop the censor between my mind and my mouth. So if something comes up, I just say it. And sometimes it's funny, but I don't say, oh, let's see, should I say that? Maybe not. I don't know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, none of us on this show have a problem with that at all. In fact, I think this may be the longest we've gone without something flying out.
So, Jeff, I got to tell you, one time when I was at KMPC, because we talked a little bit about sports, Gene Autry was the guy who owned KMPC, and he also owned the California Angels. Huh. And he was like desperate to have the Angels hit the World Series. And I'm on the air, and we're talking. I was talking about something. They maybe just did a promo for an Angels game, and I said, something? The Angels were having a terrible season. I said the only thing duller than listening to the Angels on this radio station is going to the game itself. And I hear the cowboy boots coming down the hall. Gene over to Jeff. That's our team.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
That is brilliant. It's funny. I like what you said about being prepared. I look at some of the most famous broadcasters are some of the most woefully unprepared who miss the central point of what's going on. One of my favorites ever is Larry King. I could not think of a less prepared, more unaware. He was interviewing this woman from this famous, horrific rape case, right? And she was abducted and everything else, assaulted. And she was describing how, I come out of the grocery store, and then he grabbed me and he made me drive to the woods, and then he assaulted me. And Larry goes, "What happened to the groceries?" And she gets this look on her face, like her jaw hits her chest. She goes, I guess they fell on the floor. I don't really know. So, it's just a little research, in knowing what you're dealing with. And even if you're not a subject matter expert, like I am not a subject matter expert on gameplay, but I should at least go play the game and learn something about it before we talk about it.
Absolutely.
Okay, one thing that we had speaking of like being prepared and such, there are little things in the back of your mind that when you go to talk to somebody, it comes up. Like, years ago when we first started the show, one of our, a good friend of the show, Keith Robinson, who is the current president of Intellivision, he has done a cartoon for years. It's been in papers and all that. And it didn't occur to me that Keith Robinson was the same Keith Robinson. Huh. So back in your career, first of all, I just got to ask you, you were on I Dream of Jeannie.
Yes.
Is Barbara Eden as wonderful in person as she came across on TV?
Yes, no, I'm going to tell you she is. I only did one episode with her, but we became friends. And she and I can't remember the name of her husband right then, but they came over to my house to play bridge. And she moved her hand, not her card hand, but her right hand, and hit a glass of red wine, which spread on our carpet. And she was freaking out. And you know, we're saying, don't worry about it, etc. 30 years later, I'm on a cruise ship. It's about 30 years, someplace in there. She comes on as a guest lecturer, and she sees me. She said, "God, I'm so sorry about that carpet."
Well, I got to tell you what. I think they were re-airing I Dream of Jeannie when I was like in junior high. And I have to say, I spent an hour every day after school with my bedroom door locked watching I Dream of Jeannie.
I think that's enough of that.
She was very impressive.
Yeah, she's great now.
Every teenage boy's dream. So
Right.
now, as your career arced on and you went into radio, there was an incident that I remembered hearing about, and I didn't recall it was you. The name just didn't pop out. And that was the famous, Lycus Rushdie.
Oh, yeah,
issue.
yeah.
Now, we'd love to hear you explain it in your own words, but the question that's in my mind, the question I'd love to hear your take on, being the guy that was involved with it, is when you get into issues like of artistic freedom or reprisals against artists for their opinions, I kind of look at it like this. Here you had this one guy who, because he disagreed with an artist's point of view, broke his records and, wouldn't play his work. On the other hand, it was because that artist supported the penalty of death against an artist for his point of views.
Yeah, the artist was because the artist was of the same faith, and because the fatwa had been issued. And I'm trying to remember the artist's name. It was a good singer.
Cat Stevens.
Yeah, Cat Stevens. And so he was asked in an interview, would he go along with that? He said, well, yes, I kind of have to. And it was not too bright of him to say that.
No,
but
not really.
What happened is I was on the radio. I was doing a talk show, and this promo came on my show that said, "Hi, this is Tom Likas. We're inviting all KFI listeners to send in their records. We're going to burn Cat Stevens' records. Send your record. We're going to burn the records." And it went off, and I said, "Not my people. I don't believe in that. If you want to do it on your show, go ahead. But I don't want your promo on my show, and it's not going to be there anymore." Well, that was, I think I had about another 4 days before I was out of work. But what the point of it was for me is you don't do that. If you're going to do that, do it on your own show. How can you put the whole station responsible for that? By the way, they never dared to burn the records. The fire department wouldn't let them.
So it was more the intrusion into the sovereignty of your show than it was the viewpoint of supporting or not supporting a death order from a religion.
Exactly. And Likas would do anything for publicity. He was all into publicity. And if you followed his career,
he's never changed.
Yeah, he never changed. He knows what to do, and he gets the publicity. But they called me in on the management called me in on I think it was Monday, and I went into their office before my show, and they're saying, "Well, you admit that you were God, what was the word? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But so and so, and I listened to this tape recorder going. I can hear the tape recorder. The guy's got in his drawer. So I said, no, I don't admit anything. I said what I said. That's what I said. But yeah, but blah, blah, blah. No. So we got to a point where they said, well, we're gonna terminate you or whatever. And then I got my lawyer, and we were gonna fight it. So about a week later, we made a deal where I got out of my contract a couple of months early, but they paid me about 4 or 5 months ahead.
Not a terrible outcome. Not perfect.
No.
But my wife was driving down the street, and this is true, And as I talked, she kept her foot going on the accelerator. She got pulled over by a cop. And the cop said, you know, you're speaking. She's my husband is quitting a job on the radio.
Did she get the ticket still, or did you let her off?
Oh, she got the ticket.
I had a friend who was fired on the radio while, like, the day before he was to work. So, you know, he'd been working there probably about 2 years. And they found out, okay, yeah, the show's getting canned. So he was listening to the radio and found out he was fired for the next day. So,
oh, man.
That's management for you.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, when I was up in Albany trying to get down to Florida, of course, I was making a tape, and I had board duty on Saturday while the Dodgers game was on. So, like, the Dodgers game is on. I know when the commercial's coming up, so don't worry about it. I crank up the other channel. I get the tape going, and I say, hi, it's Geoff Edwards, and blah, 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 blah. And the phone rings. And I said, oh, shit, you know. So I turn off my mic, and the guy says, hi, Mr. Edwards. Just wanted to let you know, I hope you get that job because you're going out all over the Dodger game.
Oh, man.
You know, it's great. Things like that just don't happen today, hardly ever.
No,
Like,
that's right.
I think it was more fun back then when stuff like that actually could happen.
Yeah, you know, when those things happen, of course, as a broadcaster, you say, "Oh my God!" But they make stories. I hope they do as we're talking.
I tell you what, watching just the L.A. news here. My wife like watching Fox. It comes on at 10, like an hour before the rest of the news shows. So that's the one that we'll usually watch, so we can like get to bed at a decent hour. And I'll tell you what, they have a screw up on air. I swear to God, I don't know if you watch them out here, Jeff. Almost every night they go to a video that's not even what the anchors are talking about. Every night we laugh at Fox 11 out here. It's just every night there's a screw up.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
Fox 11 used to be pretty good. They've kind of deteriorated, I think.
Man.
But there's a guy on Channel 7, the great weatherman. Man, what's his name? He's I can't. I should know his name.
I'm gonna look it up because you're gonna drive me nuts because I got to figure. Was it not Dallas Raines?
Dallas Raines.
What a great name for a weathercaster.
Perfect name. Perfect name. And he was on the other night. He's talking about the weather, the heat, and he says it is so hard to believe that Memorial Day is almost here.
I always get those days mixed up.
Well, so did he.
I'm sure he meant Labor Day.
But my point is, he does that, and they go back to the newscaster, and it's like he paid no attention.
Yeah.
he might have said, hey, Dallas, I know the forecast is right, but you got the days wrong, or anything like that. Nothing. They just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, there's lots of screw ups for LA being as big a market it is and as polished as you think they should all be. I've never seen as many screw ups from the anchors as we get.
There was a guy out here on Channel 4 who's a big newscaster, and unfortunately he also was a big drinker. And finally he got let go and he went down to Palm Springs. I was living down there at the time, and we were doing a charity show, and he had something to do, and he was drinking. And he said he was supposed to do it. He said, Jeff, you do it. I got to go. So when he went on the air, he would sit back in his chair and put his cowboy boots up on the desk and read the news. I thought that was cool. I loved it.
So speaking about the news then, I want to change the subject slightly there. Right there on your Wikipedia entry, it says, as a news reporter, you were present in the basement of the Dallas Police Department when Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald. Is there anything you particularly remember about that, other than the event, obviously?
Well, I was in San Diego, and I was heading to KHJ as their program director, and I heard the news about Kennedy being shot. I immediately made reservations on airline to get to Dallas. When I was in L.A. changing planes, I met Cleet Roberts, who is one of the most incredible newsmen ever to live. Wonderful guy, too. And Cleet said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Dallas. He said, oh, well, I'm going to Washington, D.C. That's where all the action will be.
Oh, boy.
Now I get to Dallas. I walked into the police station, And for 3 days, I never had to show any credentials, any press pass, or any identification.
Jeez.
And they brought Oswald in for a news conference with all the press there. Like, would they do that today? Amazing.
Yeah.
Oswald comes in, and one of the news guys says, are you handcuffed? And he raised his hands, and he said, yes, sir. That appeared in the newspapers the next day as Oswald gestures defiantly at the press. So, and they had a phone on the desk. I took the phone apart, wired the phone into my tape recorder, and broadcast live from that news conference. Only man in the world who did it.
Really?
Is there a recording of that out there? I mean, I'm sure there would be, right?
Well, there's a recording of me and through NBC, but I don't think there's any recording of that particular broadcast.
Because I mean, that's a pretty historic thing. I mean, of all the disputed and questioned events in the history of America, that's a biggie right there. Where do you personally come down on that? Being that you were involved in a portion of it. What's your 30-second idea of what you think really happened?
Well, I can't tell you what I think really happened, but I think that Oswald was not alone because of the way he expressed himself, the way he was seemed to be confused about being caught. If he hadn't shot the patrolman at the movie, I would have figured that it wasn't him at all. But as I said, I had free reign of the police station. I even walked into a room where Oswald and his mother were talking, and it just didn't seem to me. It didn't seem to me that he was the kind of guy that could do all of that by himself and would.
And that is a repeated theme that's been said in a lot of these controversial issues, is that this guy was a dope. He was, or not up to it, or the guy that was led onto a plane seemed in a daze, and that's good to hear your personal perspective of just wandering around the halls and seeing what you saw. Not that we're on this video game show we're going to solve the history of JFK.
No.
But we've got some pretty bright listeners who have interests outside of video games who really do enjoy hearing these little tidbits of personal experiences that shouldn't be lost to time.
I mean, personally, I don't even think he shot the police officer. It was Officer Tippett, wasn't it? I don't think he even shot him, to be honest. But anyway.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there was a really good documentary on kind of the whole thing, and it focused particularly on Oswald and, the events immediately after, he'd supposedly shot Kennedy and made his escape. And the documentary just came up with, and obviously things I can't remember now, but lots of other corroborative eyewitnesses saying that, it definitely wasn't him. It didn't look like him. He couldn't have been there at that particular time when the patrolman was, etc., etc.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I'll have to look for that.
Yeah, now that you mention, I recall seeing that. And, one of the funny things is, Jeff, I think you had a very similar experience from what you're saying. I was a young man in the Army, and was stationed abroad. And, I mean, there was no dummy. Went on through multiple degrees and, pretty successful technical experience and all that. But I think between the ages of 18 and 22, during the Cold War, I doubt I could have, without visible means of finance, bounced back and forth between Soviet Russia, the U.S., Mexico. I mean, I was a world traveler by virtue of being in the military. But, had I just popped out of high school and said, what, I'm going to wander around the Soviet Union and then get married and then go abroad and all that, I don't think I could pull that off.
I think you have a definite point. Absolutely. And I never thought that he was alone in his wanting JFK to be killed. But let me point one thing out, which when they were going to bring Oswald down, that was the first time they checked everybody's credentials. Everybody had to have a press pass or a news pass. We were all looked at. We went down there in that parking garage, and I went up to look at the kind of truck that they were going to take Oswald away in, and I was yanked back and said, "You stay down there," which means that Ruby, it wasn't wide open for Ruby to come in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they wanted plenty press there to cover it.
Yeah, and I don't think that the policeman that let Ruby in has ever been talked to or investigated that I know of.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're checking credentials, who checked the checkers? I mean,
Yeah.
that's
They even had snipers on the roofs of the trail that they were going to when they were going to drive Oswald to the county jail.
And you got to admit that was not the typical thinking of that age. You didn't have SWAT teams. You didn't have, all that level of militarized police. Your policeman was an average guy in, pressed slacks and polished shoes with a .38.
Well,
So
in Dallas, your policeman was that, but also as he directed traffic in a.
yeah, that's and there's certain events that through government muddling, or whether it's willful or by the nature of the government, have been lost to history. I mean, you look at the bin Laden raid, that has been lost to history.
Yes.
Because the first report, and we're not talking about reports from different news agencies, we're talking about from the press secretary of the president. First report, we have continuous monitoring, and it was a 45-minute raid. The next report, well, we had a 40-minute gap, but we were updated on the situation. Okay, so either you had 100% monitoring, or you saw only 5 minutes of a 45-minute raid. Which
Right.
is it? The next day, well, we had a 32-minute participation, and then this, and then will you release the video of what happened? No, never. Okay, that means you got later on, probably more than 20 stories from the same source, no video proof. The event will be forever disputed, just like the JFK shooting.
You're right. And one of the problems I find these days with newsmen is they read what's given to them, they read what comes in, and they don't investigate the story.
Oh, not a bit. And that is my number one complaint with, modern media, is that, and they refuse to put things in context. You will have the most obvious, deliberate, in-your-face connections, and they will literally, twiddle their fingers in the air and say, I don't know, maybe the very soil itself caused this to happen. I mean, how can you not see this blatant connection?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Well, you're right about that, man. Absolutely.
Do you feel...
If life were a video game, no one would play it.
That's not a bad line.
Yeah.
That correlates well with something another fellow said when video games, as they have been throughout the history of video games, being blamed for causing, violent games cause violent behavior, right? And he said, that's not true. If games cause behavior, we'd all be running down the street chasing dots, screaming about these goddamn ghosts behind us.
Which kind of brings us nicely back round to video games then. So,
video games.
So you hosted a little show called Starcade, as we said. The third and final host of it, in fact. So was it a show you'd followed and watched? Was it a show that kind of advertised a position and you applied, or did they come and find you? How did it all come about that you ended up on there?
Well, they came to me through my agent, I guess, or manager or something. But I had not known about the game. I didn't know anything about it. It was on USA Network, I think. Is that where it was where they put it? Mm-hmm. And I went up, and I said, yeah, sure, why not? I wasn't doing anything at the time, and I needed work. So I took the show and had a good time at it. I didn't think it was only going to go anywhere over a long period of time, and at least for me, it didn't. But I have to tell us, and I don't think anybody's ever been told this, but I don't have really good feelings about Jim, and I think her name was Mavis, because they never paid me the residuals they owed me. And they owed me quite a hunk of money from reruns that they did on USA Network, and they wouldn't pay it. The union got on them, and they just closed their ears and their doors. And now I don't know how much money they're making out of the website, but part of it should be mine. And it just makes you feel bad that people who come off so pure are not really.
So it's left a kind of bitter taste in your mouth, really.
Yeah.
So it was like so they were like a husband, wife, team, and did they have other history with game shows, or was Starcade kind of their first show and their idea? Do you remember how it came about with them? Or
I know that after Starcade, they came up with another show that they tried to make happen, and I think that's where my residual money went. And it didn't work, and I don't know what they've done since then. And before Starcade, I don't know whether they had a show or not.
Because then Starcade was picked up, on G4 TV, I guess in syndication or something. They played, like, every night they were playing, this was maybe about 2002, 2003, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
I
they
think.
re-aired the whole thing as well.
Yeah, they re-aired the whole thing, so there's more money you probably you'll
Yeah, well, it's not going to happen, so...
well.
Well, I tell you what, I look at it this way. You're not the only guy in this boat. We have interviewed probably at least a half dozen guys in the history of, classic video games, whether it be media, whether it be game designers or distributors or whatnot. And there is a consistent theme of people not getting their due.
Yeah.
So
over a period of time.
Well, there's an interesting point of progression. When I did Treasure Hunt, which was a really fun game for me to do, it was a very big hit, and Game Show Network wants to run them, all the episodes, but they can't, because my contract and the contract of the music guy says if you run any episodes, this is what you have to pay. And see, at the time when they signed the contracts, there wasn't any cable, there wasn't any internet or anything like that. There was just the networks. So they weren't, that's what you'd sign. Now, most contracts say in any electronic media, or we have the rights to electronic media, or something like that.
Well, it's neat because I recall, I wasn't really a big game show junkie, but when you only had 3 networks growing up, you tended to watch one whether you wanted to or not. And I remember, the Pyramid and Treasure Hunt and all those, they were just part of the pulp culture of your time.
Right.
Now, to us, we were video game fanatics. That was our thing. We went to the arcade, we played the games, we had the home consoles. So for us, that part of pulp culture was more important than, say, The Price is Right or the Brady Bunch. But we were certainly exposed to The Price is Right and the Brady Bunch. So to us, we would love to hear Geoff Edwards say, and my favorite show ever was Starcade. But that was one of many. How would you weigh Starcade in terms of, from your professional perspective, against other games shows you worked on?
Well, first of all, talking about residuals, we've been on for about 55 minutes. You know my hourly rate, right?
What we do is we cut you off after 58 minutes and reconnect again. That's the way we do it. So you never actually do an hour.
So for an MC to look back at a game, there's a couple of things that happen. First of all, it has to be, how were you treated? How was the studio? What were the audiences, the experience personally, right? And then you look at whether the game was good or bad, etc. For Starcade, we didn't have, the only audience we had was about 2 rows of chairs, like maybe 14 people. And I would go up to San Francisco. We shot it up there. And so that part of it wasn't that great. But the game itself, doing it, was great for me. I still play video games, not the arcade games, but I play games all the time. I beat Doom. I found the end of Doom. And the end of, yeah. But now it's an easy one. I play Fear, F-E-A-R. It's on the net. It's a fun first-person shooter. And what happens is, what I have to do to fit in is I have to say to the people who are playing, Mom's calling me to dinner now, because they don't. My age has beat them.
Oh man! Wow, that's great. That's great. I never would have thought that you were continuing playing like modern day games. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
I love them.
Wow. Geoff, you said first person shooter. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Wow. So there's 14 people in the audience then. I guess you didn't have someone going out warming them up before you went on.
Yeah. Whatever you said.
So what would happen during like a typical day of filming? So the contestants would arrive. Would you sit down with them before you went on and kind of get a feel for, you know, who they were, what they were about, so you'd know what to say to them on screen, or what would a typical day of filming be?
No, I never wanted to ever talk to contestants on any show before I worked. I wanted everything to be fresh. The contestants, as I remember, was usually a kid and his father.
Yeah.
Something like a team. And I would meet them on stage, and that would be what I'd be doing. I mean, I'd see them around, but that's what I'd be doing. It was much better for me not to, I'll tell you something. If I say, hi, how are you? You say, I'm fine. I say, where are you from? And you say, I'm from New York City. I had to do blah, 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 blah. I think I've already talked about that when I get on the air.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the contestants already talked about it.
Yeah.
So it's much fresher if you do it before either of you have talked.
But that kind of contradicts what you said earlier about being prepared. How do you kind of draw the line there?
Well, I would know who they were, where they were from. They'd give me the information there.
Okay.
But it wasn't, I didn't deal that much with the contestants as I dealt with the game. The contestants were nice. We had fun chatting, but it wasn't a game where I should be involved with the contestants, like let's make a deal or something like that.
Right.
But I tell you, with the parts where you were, there's a lot of little gems in there that, at the time growing up watching it, I didn't catch them so much as now. Like, when I'm an adult, 40 years old, sitting there watching it again, there was this great moment where you had these two kids on, right? The name was Dusty and Boots. And, and the announcer, Kevin or Keith, whatever, says, little Dusty and little Boots, and your eyes get about this big, like, they can't see on air, but Jeff's eyes get real big, like, what the hell did they just bring on stage? Who put me in this position? and then so a few minutes later, he's talking to little Dusty Boots, and Jeff, there's this, you should probably go back and watch yourself. You're just trying to, like, put your phrase together without really, you were talking about that filter, right? I could see you engage the filter instead of just going, what the hell, Mom, Dad? You're like, your parents must have had an interesting sense of humor. Dusty Boots, I get it.
So somebody was bound to say then, they say you should never work with children and animals, and you certainly work with children. Are there any particular incidents, with contestants that you wish the ground would open up and swallow you or them?
Well, not on that show, no. I've had other problems on other shows that I remember, but my whole career has been a bunch of dumb things that have happened. And for some reason, they've helped me.
I think it sounds like any career.
My career has been a series of dumb things. That's
well, I did Let's Make a Deal. Whenever Monty was sick, they'd call me. And I went in and did Let's Make a Deal now, and I'm brand new to it. And it's a very difficult show to do for any MC, and Monty was brilliant. But I'm doing the show, and what the people on stage knew and the director knew, whatever Monty said, they did. They never quit. They just did it. So I've done a curtain number one or this or that, and a woman goes, and I say, and in curtain 3, let's open the curtain. And the guy on the floor, his eyes rolled back into his head. They opened the curtain, and that was supposed to be the last of the prizes. So I had nowhere to go. So I said, well, see that other curtain? You have that, or what's in my pocket? In my pocket was a hand with, like, flop sweat just pouring down.
What did they pick?
They took the curtain. It worked out.
Oh,
but,
good.
And the producer never said anything to me about it. They just never mentioned it. We just went on. Life went on.
I guess you don't have time to always back up because you have to do it the next episode. You don't have time to back up and linger over any screw-ups.
Oh, no. And I can't remember any show that I did that we ever stopped tape. Now, I go every once in a while, a friend of mine will be doing a pilot, and I'll get down and hand or something and watch. They shoot a pilot like it's this monster movie. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action. Stop tape. Why? Could the consensus move please 4 inches to the left? and I'm thinking, move your camera, idiot. What difference does it make?
You know, they should just put Geoff Edwards up there, the bullhorn. All right, youngster, use your camera.
I did a pilot. I can't remember the name of it, but it was 2 couples, and I would interview them, and I'd interview one, then interview the other, and the couple that the audience liked the best would get married on the show, and then off to their honeymoon. Well, they do the show at Channel 28, which at that time had an air conditioner that went. So it's the middle of August. They shut off the air conditioning. We have an audience of people who are in their lates, who they brought from some home or something. They're there. The bride comes down and you know, da 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 da, whatever, and the minister says, "Do you take such a be lawful wedded husband?" And be lawful wife. The guy said, "Yes." He said, "I pronounce you man and wife." I said, "No, you don't." He said, "What?" I said, "You didn't ask her." So now we do it again. Now the bride's walking down. She's got sweat marks under her bridal gown. Her mascara's running. It was so horrible.
There's a guy over here on the BBC on the radio called Danny Baker, and he had a guy phone in once and propose live on air to his wife. So you naturally think, oh, you know, she's going to be in on it and say yes, and she turned him down on the air.
But you know, I did a game show over in the UK with my partner, and we brought it over and sold it, and we were over there helping out for the pilot and everything. And it was so different for me to watch because you won $40,000. And the contestant goes, "Yeah, thank you so much."
What was the show called?
God, let me think. I can't even remember the name of it at the moment. But we did a pilot for NBC, and it wasn't accepted. But we did sell it overseas.
Yeah.
Now, so I got a question for you about Starcade in specific. As we were talking about earlier, their technical department did a very good job of presentation, right?
Yes.
The games always worked. And I noticed, as I go back and watch it later, I can't say I noticed at the time, they added in a lot of little extras. Like, for example, when the kid would say play Pac-Man, right?
Yeah.
He gets to the end of the game, his time was up, he turned around, and you had just been calling the game action, and the timer expires, he turns around, and the marquee starts flashing, which is the lighted sign above the game that says, Pac-Man. In normal Pac-Mans, that does not flash when you complete an arbitrary amount of time.
Right.
So there are all these little things built into Starcade, if you go back and watch, that were, little technical upgrades to visually present the game. Did they brief you on all this, or did it just kind of happen in the background?
No, it kind of happened in the background. They didn't brief me, but I knew what was going to go on. I don't know how to explain that, but I would always get there early. I'd always go back and look at the games we were going to have, and I knew what we were going to see.
So did they buy the games? Did the manufacturers provide them under some sort of deal? How exactly did all that work?
I don't know exactly. My instinct tells me that they got the games because the games would be presented on television and therefore would become popular. But I don't really know if they bought them or not.
What happened to the games? I mean, at the end of, it looks like at the start of every episode, the 50 or so games that you mentioned that were kind of in that back room were always sort of reorganized. They were kind of never in the same spot. So, and there were a lot of games in there.
There were, and I have most of them now in my closet.
So did they buy the games? Did the manufacturers provide them under some sort of deal? How exactly did all that work?
I don't know exactly. my instinct tells me that they got the games because the games would be presented on television and therefore would become popular. But I don't really know if they bought them or not.
What happened to the games? I mean, at the end of, I mean, it looks like at the start of every episode, the 50 or so games that you mentioned that were kind of in that back room were always sort of reorganized. They were kind of never in the same spot. So, I mean, and there were a lot of games in there.
There were, and I have most of them now in my closet.
You got a big closet.
No, they.
What happened to them? Do you know what happened to them when they were done, or when an episode was done, or did they just?
No, I do not know, and I think when an episode was done, they'd put it back, but they wouldn't use it again. They wanted to show, that big room full of games.
Yeah.
But I don't know the details of what happened to those games when it was all over.
What's funny is that you joke about them, being in your closet. That Starcade, back a lot of Starcade and set is pretty much how some of our houses look.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, today we're all collectors, right? So UK over there has a pinball and a video game and a fruit machine, and SoCal's got his arcade, and I've got my arcade. So our houses look like the set of Starcade now.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know that anybody really had them anymore.
Oh, there is. I tell you, well, here's the interesting thing. Your interview is going to be aired before the people that have all those games now.
Oh,
and
wow.
it's a huge, vast segment out there. There are, websites. There's our radio show, which supports the community. It's a huge thing. I mean, there are collectors all over the country that trade these things back and forth. Values go up and down.
Wow.
Some games that sold for hundreds now sell for thousands.
Whoa, really?
Thousands now sell for hundreds. Oh, yeah.
I wonder about my favorite, which was Bagman.
Oh, I love You know what? Bagman was a game I never remember in the arcades. Actually, the first time I remember seeing it was on Starcade.
I love that game.
And, it is.
You could pick one of those up, yeah. You know what you need to do, SoCal? You need to take Geoff here down to one of the auctions in the area. And Geoff, you would probably enjoy this. What they have is there's various, forums. There's obviously like eBay and there's Craigslist and all that. So if you're looking for a Bagman, you can start looking on, and we'll be happy. SoCal there can send you the websites to start looking on, or say, hey, look, I'd like to, if you're interested. If you'd like to own a Bagman.
Is that GameGavel.com?
That's my site. That's my auction site. So that's one place. But we get a lot of consoles, and stuff right now. But on Craigslist, I mean, in Bagman, it's you see it come up every once in a while, and usually for probably $200-300, Geoff, you could get one and have somebody deliver it to your house. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So they have auctions that happen out here. About every 4 to 6 months, let's say. Wow. And you never know what, and they're just arcade game auctions. And
while you're saying that, I remember maybe 6 to 10 years ago playing elevator action on my television. And I'm wondering if maybe these games might work for somebody to put out on a cable channel so people could play them on their own televisions rather than getting the console itself.
Well, see, elevator action's been out. It came out like on the Nintendo NES back in the mid 80s, so a lot of the arcade games did come out on the Nintendo NES or the Sega Genesis, some of the home consoles. That did come out after that. A lot of the arcades did. And now there's emulation. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I mean, I've got a cabinet in my garage, Geoff, that plays every arcade game ever made.
Really?
For the most part, yeah.
And maybe that would be what you would rather have, because literally all it is, it's a PC, a computer.
Yeah.
That is basically built into like a full-size arcade cabinet. And there's a menu on there that's just alphabetized that starts with the numbered games through A through Z. And there's probably 2,500 games that all run on one system. So you can you could play every game that you ever remembered or ever liked, all on one system.
That is amazing. That's incredible.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
To think
it's come a long way, yeah.
Yeah, that you could stick all, in that room on Starcade on that set, you had 50 games. Imagine being able to have those all stuffed into one game, but have like 2,000 games.
It's hard for me to comprehend that.
It's still hard for me to comprehend that as well.
Yeah.
UK figured it out years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's called a main cab. And seriously, if you'd ever be interested in getting one, I mean, you can pick these up for maybe $400 to $600. And they look very nice and clean, something you could, put like in your living room or wherever you'd want. And, when you have people over or whatever, you could just basically just pick the game you want and boom, it fires it up and plays it. And
wow.
if you ever are interested in getting one, I mean, there's usually plenty out here I can find that.
Well, the console itself may cost $400 or $500, whatever, but my divorce would cost me thousands.
So
Yeah.
now here's the funny thing, Geoff. In the spectrum of collecting, there are collectors that have the entire floor of the house is video games and
Wow.
carpet, lights, and all that. And there are other folks, I call them those poor sons of bitches, who their wife won't let them have one game in the house. I got a friend, he has a 5-bedroom house. They have one child, okay? One. So they have empty bedrooms, they have a huge finished basement, and his wife tells him, we don't have room for one of those arcade games.
Yeah, I know how that is. My wife, who is a great, great woman, and one of the great things about her, she laughs at me a lot. If I say something, she laughs, big, hearty laugh, which I love. But she doesn't get games. She's not a game player, and she doesn't get jazz. So those two things are I have to keep to my little office.
You never did tell us how you met her, did you? There might be a reason. You don't like the same things.
Right.
I said, I told Stevie Wonder, pick me out a girl.
A risky proposition at best. But I tell you, Geoff, how far this has gone, how big this hobby is you have people that on YouTube or downloads have like every episode of Starcade, archived off. It's still a well-known and well-discussed thing. You've got probably as many people that know of your show now as it was when it aired.
Probably more.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've got the younger generation plus the older generation. You've got in the area of games, these games are still very desirable, very collectible. And what's funny is because at the time, there's always, the power of hindsight. When we look back and watch an episode of Starcade, and you're standing there in front of one game, and then 5 minutes later, another game, one of those games went on to become a huge hit. The other one, they didn't release but 100 of them, and it wasn't a hugely popular game, but now it's an extreme collectible, so it's worth a fortune compared to the one that was actually popular.
Wow.
So it's a funny market out there. It's like, kind of collectible cars or anything else, But, these games trade back and forth at auction and auction sites and from collector to collector. Like, I know I've got lots of fellow collector buddies who will call me up and say, hey, you ever going to get off that Terminator 2? I'm like,
Whoa.
well, I got another one, but it needs a board. Well, I got a board. Well, I'm kind of looking to get that Donkey Kong Jr. from you. All right, we'll do it. So
Well,
back.
I'm ready to make a business arrangement with you guys. For $1,000, attach me to one.
And you can just sit there with a lawn chair on the side of it making game calls. Get your own
Right,
personal-
exactly.
I tell you what, Geoff, there are, there's trade shows too. There's arcade trade shows and shows. There's a big one up in the Bay Area called Cal Extreme, where these guys get a hotel and they bring in about, I don't know, probably how many games? Probably 1,000,
Wow.
1,500 arcade games and pinball machines. And then actually out in Vegas, there's what's called the Classic Gaming Expo. You'd be a huge hit. I don't know if you ever like going out to Vegas, but
Yeah, I love
if you ever time it around the time of Classic Gaming Expo, we'd be happy to even get you out there and bring you into the show. I mean, it's the biggest classic gaming show. They get a bunch of arcade games. They also get a bunch of consoles. There's probably, I don't know, I think 3,000 or 4,000 people that will attend it. And like last year, there was a couple arcade movies back in the day called like Joysticks. I don't know if you remember that. They brought in the producer and the director of Joysticks, which he was a big hit, and especially people like you that for you it might have been kind of a small part of your history and what you've done, but to them it's like it's a big part of it, and you would be such a huge hit at a show like this because a lot of the classic gaming alumni and classic gaming gurus and gods have all been there. They've done the show. Everybody's seen them, talked to them, heard their stories. And, every once in a while you come across somebody like you that nobody's really heard the stories, or nobody's, of course, met you. And there's probably maybe even some contestants that I know for a fact that a few contestants of Starcade go to this show every year. That they have it. So, I mean, you could come there and it would just be a really cool new thing for people to see, and people get to know you. And so if you ever be interested in coming out, I don't know, we'd make it, try to make it worth your time. And it would be really cool to bring you out as a part of our show even. And you could hang out in Vegas and spend a couple hours at the show and just
Mike,
have some fun out there.
that might be fun, man. Keep me up to date on what's going on there. Now, I have to tell everybody that I don't look the same, and this is a story that is not well known in the business, but about, I can't tell you how many years ago, Wink Martindale was having a real problem getting work, and he was scrambling, and so I gave him my hair.
Wink Martindale.
God, he was on everything too.
Yeah, he was. Was he on Newlywed Game? He was Newlywed Game. Was he the big one on Newlywed Game?
No, that was.
Who was on Newlywed Game?
Wasn't it Chuck Willery?
No, Chuck Willery did the other one. I can't remember, and he's a great guy. I know him. Just had dinner with him a couple of months ago.
The Newlywed Game guy? Okay, I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, Jeff, as soon as SoCal said gaming convention, the gears in my head started spinning, and the immediate thing for me that came out was we got to put you in front of Classic Gaming Expo. What it is, to give you like the big overview, is on one weekend usually it's August, July timeframe, they put on this expo in Vegas. So we'll go to a hotel, like say, Riviera Tropicana, and they'll rent this giant hall, and then they'll have like extra rooms. And then you've got basically like all these vendors set up, and like our show is there. We have a booth with our banner and our microphones and all that. And what comes to this show is, first of all, classic gaming fans. Then there's the classic gaming media, which is us. And then you've got what we call the alumni, which is what you would be. You would be called an alumni. You're one of the people that made this industry happen. Okay. So they do like on Friday night an alumni dinner where they sort of reunite these guys, right? So when you go to the alumni dinner, what you've got is the guy that designed the game for the arcade, then the guy that designed it for the home console, and plus the guy who invented the hardware, and then the guy that published the magazine that you read to get your information for your show. So you would be one more piece in the puzzle of the guys that made all this happen.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. I'll tell you how fun it is that we go every year without fail. This year, unfortunately, they weren't able to do the show through no fault of their own. It was just a financial thing. So we decided, well, we're going to Vegas anyway. So our radio show went up to Vegas and did our own event. But
I love it.
Oh, it is a blast up there. But what happens is Friday night, sort of like the alumni reunion, get together, all that. And then what they do on Saturday and Sunday is they have like the floor open where people can walk through and buy things from vendors. They have bands playing video game music live. And then they have what's called, the panel discussions, right? Where they have like, guys like, say, the original Atari designers or Activision designers sit down and talk about their games. So, like, for example, on one of your shows, you gave away the Activision prize packs. It was like a collection of Activision games, right?
Yeah.
Well, the guys that wrote those games and the guys that created the company are there at the Classic Gaming Expo. So, like I said, you're one more piece of the context, right?
Right.
And
wow.
What I think you would really enjoy is they always they do some game shows live at Classic Gaming Expo. So they'll do, like, say, for example, Video Game Jeopardy. So they'll have the board set up with all the stuff, we can put you in touch with the owners who are good friends of the show and really nice guys. And if there's a way to finagle you coming up there and doing something, it will be so well received. I can't even imagine anything cooler than that.
Even just having you MC a game contest, just like you did on the show. I mean, they could reenact that, because they have game competitions.
Yeah.
So that would just be amazing.
Well, just keep me up to date, Mike. And
I will.
If I'm not out on a cruise ship someplace, I think I'd like to do that.
Yeah, and
I think you would find yourself very well received by a bunch of people who are right up your alley.
Yeah.
Great.
And it was Bob Eubanks, by the way.
Yes, Bob Eubanks, of course. I got to tell you something about Bob. He is a really great guy. I never was very close to him as far as friendship, but I did a show that he owned, and I did it in Branson. And the guy producing the show shut it down and didn't pay me. And Bob Eubanks, who was an owner of the show, gave me half of his personal appearance money every time he did one until I was paid off.
Wow.
That's a really straight, good guy.
No doubt. Do you guys ever get together out here? I mean, older game show hosts. I mean,
No, we really don't.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I guess we weren't that close. I guess when we were, when we were doing shows. So it's like there's a producer here that produced a bunch of game shows, and he had his 80th birthday, and all the MCs were there, the different producers, everybody was there. It was amazing, and they showed films of all his different shows, and so that was fun. And I ate at the same table with Bob. Things like that happen rarely, but when they happen, they're really great.
What do you think about the fate of game shows in general? I mean, during the day now, I mean, there's I guess still a few. I mean, Price is Right still kind of going on, and you got Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. I mean, those are like the only 3 real game shows that I can still think of that they're kind of still around. And now, of course, you got a lot of the primetime game shows that have popped up over the last 10 or maybe 10 years plus. I mean, what do you think about some of the game shows that are on now where you can win $1 million? I mean, is it compared to the prizes and stuff that you guys all gave away kind of back then?
Well, I'll give you an inside story, and I won't tell you what the show was, but all the producers, etc., were sitting around a table in a room, and they had everything but the bonus round, and they're trying to work it out. The prize was, if you won, it was $1 million, right? Mm-hmm. And should we do 3 out of 7? Should we do 5 out of 6? And one guy said, look, let's just say what we're really doing. We're trying to figure out a way that no one will take $1 million. And that basically was the truth. I've pitched a couple of game shows in the last year, and they don't want games. The game itself, although it could be a great game, they don't want it. The Comedy Network pitched a great show to them. Really, really good, funny, inspired, just wonderful. And they said, well, we're just looking for something bigger. So they like A Minute to Win It, and what's the one where the people get smashed into things?
I just started, that one. Yeah, they fall off a moving train or something.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like it's no place for game show producers anymore because it's not game shows anymore.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Your comments immediately bring to mind a movie that I watched. It came out in the mid-'90s called Quiz Show. It had, who was in that thing?
I'm looking here, so I'll help you out.
I can hear you Googling
it was a bunch of big names. But did you ever see that movie?
Yeah.
Directed by Robert Redford. John Turturro, Rob Morrow.
Was that the one where the shows are going to be shut down?
Yeah, because they were suing. The federal government got involved, and it was the game show was a setup because they had this wormy, unlikable guy, and then they had this really nice guy that they wanted to be the leader. So they were padding the questions and all that. Well,
during that time, most of the shows were done by sponsors. The X and X show brought to you by Broadbent Kool-Aid or something. So the sponsors had a lot to say about things. You wanted your show to be popular and to have the right people on. The rules were not very stringent, if there were any. And what happened was that I'm trying to remember the name of the show, but was it 21, something like that?
That was the name of the show, I think, on Quiz Show. Is that what that's?
Yeah,
Well, anyway.
21 is the game in the movie quiz show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they were going to shut it all down until this guy came up and confessed and etc. But Goods and Todman had their offices in New York, and it was Saturday, and they on Monday were going to be investigated and called in front of the Congress or whatever, and they had a big meeting in the offices in New York on a Saturday. Well, Todman was known for imbibing a lot, and he had no clue what was going on. Apparently, he had slept in his office that night, and he comes out, and they're all like worried and everything. And he says, "Well, whose birthday is it?" But that was a bad time, and it was a time that rules started to come in, and they started to pay attention to making them real rather than constructed.
Was there any big competition between, maybe out here on the West Coast shows, between, you or any of the other game show hosts? Did any game show hosts that, just they didn't get along? I'm just trying to dive in just briefly into, because there's so many great game show hosts you can think of over the years that we just, talked about Wink Martindale and Bob Eubanks and Len Doss, who did Len Doss? He did Family Feud?
Richard Dawson.
Richard Dawson.
He was in Hogan's Heroes.
Len Dawson, I'm thinking of a football player, I think, or something.
Now, Richard Dawson and I had a whole history together. I did a show that Bob Barker owned called Lucky Pair, and it was only on the CBS station here. It wasn't network or anything. And my deal was I could leave it after a certain amount of weeks if it didn't get syndicated. It didn't, and they hired Richard Dawson to come in. A while after that, Goods and Todman wanted me to come in and do a pilot for that show, the Family Feud. And Regis Philbin had just stopped doing a show like Hate Your Neighbor or something. And I thought it was going to be the same type of show, but I also was in negotiations with Bob Stewart on a pilot. And I told the Goods and Todman people, I can't talk to you until I finish these negotiations. I mean, there's no law about that, but I just thought that was fair to Bob. He's a great friend. So who did they get? They got Richard Dawson. And so we followed he's followed me, but much more successful as far as that goes for the whole time. But we never had like a feud or anything. He's a good guy. I liked him. He liked me. Everything was cool.
Did you ever meet Bob Barker?
Oh yeah, sure.
What's your impression of Bob Barker? I mean, and how did he get to work with all the Foxy ladies? I mean, did you ever have a chance did you have models on any of your shows? Or I don't think you did you?
No, just on my radio shows.
Yeah.
Now, Bob Barker was one terrific guy, and he auditioned me for the show Lucky Pair. And then I had a talk show in the morning with Meredith McCrae, and I interviewed Bob Barker several times. It's just really a great guy. He and I had different views on fur, perhaps, but he's a great guy.
Yeah, it's funny that issue has sort of come to, and I think as he said, that's how I want to be remembered for that work. Where I'm a little like, okay, not quite the same passion for what you have, but what really came across in a lot of other like appearances he did is what a genuinely funny guy he is.
That's true. That's true. You reminded me of something talking about Bob Barker and the way things go. Sometimes being an MC and also being a producer of game shows is a hazard. I did a show as a guest called, it was about crossword puzzles, Crosswits. And the idea would be there'd be a couple celebrities and some contestants, and you would be answering questions and filling in blanks, etc. So one of the questions was an 8-legged insect, and the contestant, they spell out spider. Oh yeah, you won, etc. So we go to break, and at the end of the show, and I say, that's not going to work. What are you talking about? I said, a spider's not an insect; it's an arachnid. And that was the last time I worked for them. But I saved him some trouble, Yeah. There was another show that, and I can't remember the name of it, but there was a panel of celebrities, 2 contestants, and it was like Hollywood Squares in a way. Each celebrity would have like a funny answer to give if they were called on, and those are written. I usually didn't use them because I used my own answer. But a gal next to me, who was a starlet at the time, had hers in front of hers, and she was 1 question off. So if the question was number 3, she gave the joke answer to number 4. It was so funny. I couldn't contain myself. It was just like hysterical. How many crickets do you? What's another thing called cricket besides the insect? An airplane jet almost crashed.
And some guy holds up the sign for the audience, laugh now.
Yeah, right. Laugh on your way out.
So,
how many surrealists does it take to change a light bulb? A fish.
So I'm getting conscious of your fee now because we didn't cut you off after 58 minutes, but that kind of takes us up to the 90s, and now you're doing something totally different, which is kind of travel journalism and travel blogging. Is that a retirement funded by all the arcade machines you stole from Starcade, or is that a working gig that you fell into? How did that come about?
I fell into that actually. I was doing a radio show in Palm Springs, just a little show with a couple of friends of mine. And no, I was alone on that one. And I got a call from a guy named Paul Lasley, who was an old pal and contemporary. And he said, which cruise line was it? Crystal Cruises is inaugurating their ship, the Crystal Symphony. And they'd like you, would you like to do your radio show from the ship? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So my wife and I got on the boat in New York, and we went all the way around to L.A., through the canal and all that stuff. And we did the show. At dinner, we all sat together. All the press sat at one table. And I was sitting next to a woman who was the editor of a magazine called Diversion in New York. And I said, I don't think anybody's ever written about a world cruise. And she said, you write about it and I'll publish it. And that was my first writing as far as cruise stuff went. And that started my career as a travel writer.
Do you?
It's just seamless.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I have a book coming out called, what is it called?
That's not just a introduce the segment sometimes.
Yeah, it's an ebook. It changes all the time. It's called Going All the Way.
Ooh.
And a lot of people thought it was different than it is. But it's a phrase I hadn't heard since high school. It's about 2 world cruises, and on one of them we crashed.
Oh, really?
We hit a reef off of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. It was Norwegian night. The officers were all Norwegian. And they celebrate by drinking akavit and going, skål, skål, skål.
The skull song.
And
You hit it.
And up on the bridge was the most junior officer. Now, it's a moonlit night. You can see everything. A beautiful night. And you could see these reefs, a lot of reefs around. And this guy was the guy who was taking us through. What happened was that he didn't look out the window. He did all his computer stuff and everything, forgot to put in the current, and bam, we hit so hard the people on stage fell down. And that was the end of that world cruise.
Did you like the Norwegian line? I mean, the accident notwithstanding.
Oh, that wasn't Norwegian. It was actually there was a Canard line at that time. And And it was a great ship. It was wonderful. A lot different than the ships are today. If you went to dinner, if you didn't have a tie on, you didn't eat. I mean,
didn't Kennard make the Titanic?
The Kennard. Say that once more.
No, White Star made the Titanic.
Oh, White Star. Did Kennard? Who made what the? Oh my gosh! You know, the one out here in L.A. Harbor.
Okay. Queen Mary.
Queen Mary, yeah.
Yeah, that was a Cunard ship.
Was a Cunard ship. Yeah, that's a beautiful ship.
It is beautiful.
Well, my wife and I, we spent the night on it a couple of times, and the rooms, and it's really a neat. They don't make them like that anymore. I'll say that.
Well, I'll tell you the funny thing about the crash when it happened. The Cunard had 3 ships going around the world. They had the Queen Elizabeth, they had our ship, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but the other one caught fire off of the Philippines.
Ooh, my.
And they had to be taken into Manila. And those people were given the choice of getting on the Queen Elizabeth to finish the world trip or getting on our ship. So a lot of them got on our ship. Well, then, then we crashed. They were kind of upset about that. So anyway, we crashed, and that's the end of that world cruise. And Cunard now is like, 2 ships out of 3.
Yeah, right. Whoever was on that 3rd ship was like, oh my God, what's going to happen to us?
Actually, they ran into a whale off of Lisbon and came in with this whale hanging off their bow. So, everybody is screaming and yelling and, oh my God, my God. And Cunard tells the captain of the ship, you must have a news conference tomorrow and put this right. So the news conference, he's there with all his medals and everything in his whites, just really looking wonderful. And they asked him about it. He said, well, there's a lot of them out there. And it's actually no more than running over a cat back home.
I sail off the coast of Dana Point a lot, where there's lots of whales out there. I've never seen one.
No.
Which I guess up where you're at, do you see them a lot up there? Or?
No, we're down below you, just the Manhattan Beach. But we see dolphins every once in a while, but no whales.
No whales. Yeah.
I tell you, the ship I took that I really enjoyed was the Norwegian Epic.
Yep.
This thing is a freaking city. I mean, it takes you a few days to actually get used to where the heck things are, Just a wonderful, wonderful ship. But nothing exciting happened. I mean, we didn't hit anything. Nobody caught on fire. It wasn't quite as eventful as your vacations.
Or like those people that, was the Carnival one just off the coast out here? Wasn't that, a year ago or something? Where you weren't on that one, Jeff. Did you mention it on your blog somewhere? I thought I read. Or?
Yeah, I talked about it. The Carnival Splendor, I think, is the ship, and how it
generators all went out or something, or
they lost their power. They had a fire, and they had to redo a lot of the ship. It's going out again, and it sails out of Long Beach.
Long Beach, yeah.
They've given up one port. Well, one of the problems cruise ships are having right now is Mexico.
Right.
Yeah, because there's so much going on, and a lot of people don't want to sail down there anymore.
Yeah. Have you been down there recently?
Oh, yeah. I go a lot. The Cabo San Lucas is the biggest party place as far as the cruise ships go.
You think it's still safe down there? I mean,
I think Cabo San Lucas is safe. I would not get off the boat in Acapulco.
Yeah.
No, that place ain't what it used to be.
I've got to say, I'm just looking at your blog now. This is something I've got to read up on. It's I like the style it's written in. There's an article here, an entry in your blog. The blog, by the way, is nospintravel.com. It's called The Disorient Express, and this is a quote. Don't worry about your connection, the reservation agent said. If your train is late, we'll just slow the other one down.
Yeah, that's a true story. That whole thing is true. I remember you read it, but read the one that says, get on the boat or something like that.
Marshall's Charlie, that one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Jeffrey, a large Marshallese woman dictated, handing me a radio. Get on da boat.
That's it.
I love the way that you commented on that train, because we, in fact, I didn't even get a chance to tell Mike and Mike about this. We did the Classic Gaming Expo in Vegas, right? So we did that over a weekend, and then my wife and I stayed in Las Vegas for another week or so. And when we had sort of like an open-ended return, we said, all right, well, okay, let's head back home, so we have a few days before work, which turned out to be a day. And so we go to McCarran, and we get our flight arrangement, and we're waiting for our flight, and like an hour goes by, hour and a half, and finally the plane shows up. So we get on the plane, and they fly us to Charlotte, North Carolina, instead of straight to Washington, D.C. So I'm like, why are we landing in Charlotte, North Carolina? And so we get off the plane, and they said, those of you with connections, please go to the desk. Those of you who are here, unbeknownst to yourself, please go to the desk. So my wife and I went to the desk, and they had, hotel slips already laid out, and shuttle vehicles already ready, and like very organized, right? And I guess they were expecting maybe a big thank you for this. And the lady looks at me and she goes, "Oh, sir, what's your last name?" I said, "Why am I here, first of all?" And she said, "Well, the flight that was leaving was already left early, so we already knew before you left that you were going to be here, so we made arrangements." I said, "All right, why would you not have given me the option in Las Vegas? Sir, would you like to stay another night in Vegas? I could have just gone back to the hotel. Or would you like to fly out to the middle of goddamn nowhere and sit there overnight while your baggage sits on our plane? Because," and I quote, "it's not that we can't, it's that we won't retrieve your baggage." So you go to the hotel with no toiletries, no clothes, no nothing. And it's like, oh, great, this is wonderful. I could have just gone back to the hotel in Vegas, right? So US Air has my supreme thanks for that.
That's it. Do you have time for an airplane story?
We certainly do.
I mean, it's still Wednesday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I used to fly to New York every other week to do Jackpot, the television show on NBC. I'd finish my radio show. I'd get the 1 o'clock out on American Airlines to New York, and I'd do Flight 21 coming back. So by the time I'd done the show for about 6 months, I knew everybody on the airplane. I mean, and all the crew, the stewardesses, and et cetera, et cetera. And I always sat in the same seat up in the front of 747. Now we're starting to go out on the 747 at night to go back to L.A., and I felt something. And I called the stewardess over, and I said, "I think we have a flat tire." And she said, "I'll tell the captain." So she comes back in about 3 minutes or so, and she says, "The captain says he'll tell you when we have a flat tire." Well, we did have a flat tire. That thing shredded, went through all the hydraulics in the landing gear, no brakes, off the runway into the field or whatever.
Runoff area.
And they had to take us off that plane. So now, of course, it's like free drinks for everybody. Have a good time. We get back on the airplane, take off, and it's later at night. And that day, the 747 in first class upstairs had a bar and a lounge, couches and chairs, wonderful place. And I was up there, and I was exhausted. So I was like lying on the couch. And I hear this guy giving the stewardess a hard time. And I thought, I got to go up and take care of that. But then she handles it. So I keep my eyes closed. Well, she did okay. All of a sudden, I'm lifted up off the couch and set on my feet by this huge man. I mean, this guy was big. I'm looking in his eyes, and he's sitting down, and I'm standing up. And he's got marks. I know he's a hitman. I just know he's a hitman. And I said, "Next time you do that, just say, please, I'll get up." So I go back to my seat, and we're flying along, and I'm thinking, Sinatra carries a gun. Why don't I carry a gun? I should have a gun. I take care of that son of a gun. I should have a gun. Well, I was just so frustrated. Now we're getting ready to land at LAX. Then the seatbelt sign goes on, landing. Now, the plane's all dark, no lights on, really. And this guy is also in first class, and he gets up in order to get up, he pulls the chair of the guy in front of him, and he goes, "Rah!" Boom, and just lets go of that chair, and the guy flies about 4 inches forward. And he goes into the men's room. And I look over there, and there's a place where they had been serving drinks, and there's a bucket of ice that is now half ice and half water. And I took it over to the man's seat and poured it in. And then I went back to my seat. Now he comes back. He's got to sit down. It's the only seat left. And just seatbelt time, he's just now going, ah! Just screaming mad. So I'm telling you this story, and I was going to go on the Dinah Shore television show and tell her the story. And she says something about a wild thing happening on the flight. And suddenly I realized if this guy watches this show, I'm dead. So I had to make up another story. But, when these strange things happen.
Finally, we scooped Dinah Shore.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, Jeff, look, man, we want to thank you so much for coming on with us, man. And, we could talk about just Starcade for whatever time it would take. But the truth is, the episodes of Starcade are out there, and people do and are going to watch them. What we hope to accomplish here is that someone's going to come and, as people do, and listen to our show. They're going to watch Starcade, and they're going to put two and two together and find out a little bit more about what it took to make this go down and the kind of guy it takes to make this thing happen.
No, I'm just saying I appreciate the time. It's really been fun talking to you guys.
I was going to say, if we teach people nothing about Starcade or even game shows in general, they've got to read your blog. And I've got to quote another one here about your trip to Jamaica. You say, you're not allowed to use the nude pool unless you're naked. We have no report on the nude pool. However, a look from afar confirmed a suspicion of mine. Nudity is not always sexy.
Well, you guys, excuse me, that's one blog that goes through travel. I have another one called, I write for avidcruiser.com. I've got a bunch of stuff on there, and then I have Travel Jeff, and you can Google that stuff. And I try to put humor in the stuff that I write, and that's why I don't write for any magazines.
Well, we have a show notes page, a web page that is specific to each episode. And so in the episodes that you're on, we may split your interview over 2 episodes, or we may run it as over 1. But we'll put links to those blogs in the show notes so people will find it without the need for Google.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What we'll also do is we will send you, when we air your interview, now let me tell you this completely up front, we have been a victim of our own success in that a lot of shows, their struggle is to get material. Like they get this guy, then we finally get this guy. We have about a year and a half of interviews stacked up. So we might air your interview next month. We might air it in the spring. We just don't know.
Well, I know what's going to happen. I can just see it happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an interview we did with Geoff Edwards, who unfortunately passed away 4 years ago.
Yeah, we might want to schedule his in the next month or two.
My biggest fear is that Monty Hall and I die on the same day. Then he'll get all the publicity.
Ladies and gentlemen, the late Geoff Edwards.
Very pragmatic about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely send you links when we air the show with your interview in it.
I'm thinking it's going to be sooner rather than later. I think we need to
I think so.
this one out. It's been good
Now,
stuff.
do you want me to do a promo or a quick 5-second thing?
Yeah, I think Mike had something he had in mind he wanted you to quote, didn't you, Mike?
Well, you said it says you're famous for your quote, right you are. On Wikipedia, it just says one of the things.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how we worked that into the bumper, but the name of our show is Retro Gaming Roundup.
To tell the truth, I never knew that my thing was right you are until long after the game shows were over.
This might have been the first time you've ever heard that.
Yeah, somebody said to me one time, and I said, really? Because I didn't like to do those things where you really get caught in a phrase, but there it is.
Well, great. Again, Jeff, a real pleasure meeting you. It's kind of funny for us, growing up, we play the games, watch the shows, and now we sit down and talk to the guys that created it all. And, when we were dopey little kids sitting in the living room, knowing that, okay, like for me, I was in the middle of Mississippi. Only the California kids typically are going to get to go on these shows. I'm not ever going to get on this show.
Yeah.
And here it is, a few decades later, I best them because I get to interview the guy that did it. So.
Well, you guys are great. I haven't told some of those stories I've never told, so my lawyer will be calling.
for retractions or reactions.
Okay, guys.
Thanks, Jeff. But
Thanks,
we'll be in
Jeff.
touch. I'll keep you in the loop on some of these things, and see what happens.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, Jeff. Thanks.
See you, Jeff.
Bye. Oh, no! 2015, not enough. If you'd gotten that astronaut, I think we would have had it. Well, David, congratulations anyway for being our champion. Vicky, congratulations to you. You were part of the team. And we'll see you on the next Starcade. This is Geoff Edwards. Till then, I hope all your troubles get zapped. Bye-bye.
This is Kevin McMahon speaking. Starcade is a JM production.